Let me read to you a passage from the 11th chapter of St. Luke's Gospel, verses 47 to 54. It's the Gospel for Thursday of the 28th week in Ordinary Time, Year 2. St. Luke writes, Jesus said, "Woe to you, because you build tombs for the prophets, and it was your forefathers who killed them. So you testify that you approve of what your forefathers did. They killed the prophets, and you build the tombs. Because of this, God in his wisdom has said, I will send them prophets and apostles, some of whom they will kill, and others they will persecute. Therefore, this generation will be held responsible for the blood of all the prophets that has been shed since the beginning of the world, from the blood of Abel to the blood of Zechariah, who was killed between the altar and the sanctuary. Yes, I tell you, this generation will be held responsible for it all. Woe to you, experts in the law, because you have taken away the key to knowledge. You yourselves have not entered, and you have hindered those who were entering." When Jesus left there, the Pharisees and the teachers of the law began to oppose him fiercely and to besiege him with questions, waiting to catch him in something he might say. That's from Luke chapter 11, verses 47 to 54. And what does it suggest to us? Well, let us notice the heart of what our Lord is saying in our gospel passage today. He issues a somber warning. Woe to you, he says. You are doing what your forefathers did, who killed and persecuted the prophets. Woe to you, therefore. He then continues, therefore, this generation will be held responsible for the blood of the prophets that has been shed since the beginning of the world, from the blood of Abel to the blood of Zechariah, who was killed between the altar and the sanctuary. Yes, I tell you, this generation will be held responsible for it all. You know, I remember watching an interview on television with the great actor Charlton Heston. He said he thought that a great modern problem was the lack of acceptance of responsibility for actions taken. Our Lord tells his audience, the Pharisees and teachers of the law, that they will be held responsible for the harm they have done and were doing, and in particular for their rejection of him and his teaching. Let us take this serious point of being held responsible and make a few practical applications. What is it to harm a person? The meaning is obvious, but strangely, there is so much harm done to helpless and defenseless persons that is not regarded as harmful and wrong. Let us take one of the most striking examples of harm being perpetrated on defenseless persons: abortion. Every year there are untold thousands, hundreds of thousands of abortions every year in the world. Even in a religious country, religious in principle, such as the United States, there are prodigious numbers of abortions going on every year, and it is legal. The same applies to Australia. Defenseless and vulnerable human life is being destroyed because it involves a cost, sometimes a very great cost, to convenience. This situation is allowed for by law, due to the free decisions of legislators and judiciaries. It is a horror to God our Creator, who himself gives life at the moment of every conception. His own child, thus conceived, is destroyed. Our Lord's words are ominous. Yes, I tell you, this generation will be held responsible for it all. But there is more. So much of the cutting edge of genetic and embryonic research involves the destruction and harm of the newly conceived human embryo. Not only is it utterly unnecessary in view of the discoveries of the potential in adult stem cells, but it is profoundly unethical in the sight of God. The defenseless and the vulnerable, the most defenseless and the most vulnerable, are attacked and destroyed for the sake of presumed benefits to others, especially others who are stronger. We must remember our Lord's description of the general judgment in the 25th chapter of St. Matthew's Gospel. The divine judge will say to those on his right, "Come, you who are blessed, for whatever you did to the least of these, my brothers, you did to me." He will then say to those on his left, "Depart from me, for whatever you did to the least of these, my brothers, you did to me." It is as serious as that. God cannot look but with a holy wrath on the active destruction of his little ones by those who should know better. And the opprobrium endured by those heads of executives and legislators who actively resist and even undo this institutionalized harm might be great, but they will be rewarded by God for their defense of life. The terrible thing is that these things are not named nor regarded for what they are, sins of the first order. And now, here is a magnificent field of apostolate and mission for the lay Christian in the world. The world has to be brought to the light of Christ. The Christian must love the world as did Christ, who died that the world might be saved. The world is to be won over to the truth, for it is the truth that saves. Our Lord said on another occasion, when speaking to his enemies, that they would die in their sins. This is what the Christian who, filled with love for the world, must make sure does not happen to the world of his time. The truth must be proclaimed, defended and argued for. The argument must eventually be won, remembering what our Lord said, that we shall be held responsible for what we do. Let the words of Christ, as given in our gospel today, ring in our minds. Yes, I tell you, this generation will be held responsible for it all. Woe to you experts in the law, because you have taken away the key to knowledge. You yourselves have not entered, and you have hindered those who were entering. The Christian, with joy in his heart and a smile on his face, has the calling to bring Christ and his teaching to the world. Therein is found life, life here and life hereafter.